Hey, I'm Kai Narezo from Flamenco Explained, and in this video we're going to look at bar chords because bar chords give people a lot of trouble, but they're really not that hard. And I just want to tell you now that you're going to call me a liar at some point in this video because I'm going to tell you don't try so hard, don't press so hard, and it's not going to work for you. But the good news is that I'm going to show you the things that you can work on to make bar chords easier for you. And if you stick with this instead of trying to press harder all the time, you will learn how to play bar chords without a whole lot of effort and definitely without pain. So what's a bar chord? A bar chord is basically when we use our index finger to press more than one string, usually across the whole neck, right? And it basically does the same thing as the nut does. So we're not talking about the theory of bar chords, which is kind of cool. You know, you can take this chord, move it here. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about the technique of how to make this sound as clean as that sound. The really good news is that most bar chords are not this. So you don't have to press all of the strings at the same time. But we're going to play around with that anyway right now. This is the hardest bar chord there is to play because you have to press all of the strings with your finger. Later on, we're going to see that most bar chords you only have to press a few of the strings because these fingers are doing some of the work, right? So what happens is most people pick up a guitar, try to play a bar chord, it sounds sort of like this or buzzy and not good, and so they press harder. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's that pressing harder is almost never the answer, because if it's not sounding right, what's happening is you're not pressing the right way and the right place with the right part of your finger. Now, the bad news is that I can't tell you exactly which is the right part of your finger because everyone's hand is a little different, but I can give you some strategies for finding this so that you don't have to press so hard, right? Now, sometimes pressing harder will make it sound better, but that's still a bad strategy because that's going to wear your hand out. You want to find a way to play bar chords without a whole lot of effort. And what it really comes down to is mushing your hand in just the right way. I know that sounds a little silly. So one thing to keep in mind is that in your index finger, there's a little crease right here. And if the string falls into there, it's going to be really hard, no matter how hard you press, to get it to sound right. So you want all of the strings to be on fleshy parts of your finger, right? That's thing one as you press. The other thing is that for a lot of us, the side of the finger seems to work better than trying to go flat this way. And then so one element is up or down this way, right? If you bar like this, I can already feel that this other crease, which usually isn't even part of the problem, is getting in the way if I go way far too up. Adjusting this way is one thing. And then when you press, you can sort of moosh your bone inside your finger, right? Until you find the right place. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is not immediately try to play all 6 strings, but to sort of roll your finger back and forth on the fret so that at first you're basically playing the 6th string. Now you're using part of your index finger to play the 5th string, roll it some more, play the 4th, roll it some more, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, right? I'm not trying to get all of them at the same time. I'm just rolling my finger back and forth. Now, if while you're rolling, one of the strings sounds like that instead of like that, then something's up with the placement of your finger, and that's when you have to say, okay, my first guess or my default, the thing that I tried first didn't really work. So you either move up or down a little this way. You might move a little this way. I really don't recommend moving this way because that's, you know, just going to make it harder to use the fingers that have to play the rest of the notes. But again, don't try to play all 6 strings at once. You'll get there eventually. Just think about this rolling and see if you can get all of the strings one by one, right? And then a fun thing to do is to see if you can play the 6th and the 1st at the same time. Now in between, right? None of those are ringing because I'm not pressing. I'm just directing my energy at the 6th string and the 1st string by going like that, muting everything else. So now I could say, okay, I'm going to try to play the 4th string. So I'm going to let everyone else up. I'm just going to direct my energy at the 4th string now. 6th string, muted. 5th string, muted. third string might sound, nope. Second, first, I'm only directing the energy there. This is going to be important in a minute. So I want you to play around with finding the bar, right? And then just playing one note at a time, but without moving the finger, right? You're mooshing in a little more here or down here, and you're not worrying about the other strings. You're just getting used to playing a note or two with this part of the finger as opposed to the fingertip, which is where we would normally play a note. And I'm doing it up here at the 5th fret for now because it's just a little easier at first to play up here, or even up here for sure, than it is here. The 1st fret is the hardest fret to make sound good with a bar chord. But if you get the hang of this, it's not going to be hard, really, once we get into it. Take a little time and really just play with this idea of being able to play each of the 6 strings at any point, and then you might say, okay, first 2 strings, second 2 strings, next 2, next 2, next 2, right? But at any point, right, the rest of those strings not sounding. I'm not doing a full bar. When I do that, I'm just doing 2 strings at a time, and then you might try 3. Now again, I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm making it seem easy because it's not hard for me because I've practiced this a lot. If you haven't practiced this a lot, playing 3 strings at a time might be really weird at first. And again, what you need to remember is that pressing harder is not going to fix the problem. Finding the right place is what's going to fix the problem. So let's get into some practical bar chords that you're going to play. And this is where you see that life actually gets easier than you think. The first one we're going to take is this E shape, right? So if you take an E major chord, but you play it with these fingers, right? Same chord, different fingers, because we're keeping the index free. And we're going to move that up to the 5th fret. So now our chord happens to be an A major. Now, if I take these fingers away, right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they all sound good. If I take these fingers away, you'll see that I'm not barring all 6 strings. I'm only barring the strings that have to sound. Those 3, I'm not barring at all because these fingers are taking care of that. So I have a sort of arced index finger that's playing 2 strings here, 1 string here, not worrying about these 3, right? So I'm not doing a full bar and then adding this. I'm relaxing part of the finger. I'm barring some of the strings, in this case 3, and then I'm adding this, right? Now, I know that seems a little weird, but if you just think about arcing your finger and forgetting about the pressure in here, and just sort of think about here, right? This is where you're directing the energy of the index finger to play these top 2 strings, and then this, and then you add these. Once you find this, and again, you may find you need to adjust your finger, wiggle it around a little at first to really get the hang of what your bar is going to feel like. So once you find this, maybe play it at the 3rd fret. Same exact feeling should work at the 1st fret. And I'm not going to lie, you might have to press just a teensy bit harder at the 1st fret, but it's really, we're talking about a few % more. It should not be a big effort by any means. So this is kind of your best case scenario, this chord, because 3 notes that are next to each other are not being barred, and so it really takes a lot of pressure off the bar. We're going to look at another chord now, which is an A minor. So we're going to take, this is our E major. If we take this finger off, we get an E minor. We move that shape up to the 5th fret. We get an A minor, right? But now the bar has to take care of 4 strings, right? So I have to direct the energy at the 6th string, and then the 3rd, the 2nd, and the 1st. But I don't have to put any energy to those 2 strings, right? So a little more work for the bar itself here than here, but not a whole lot more, right? You just have to learn to direct the energy of your finger so that you're pressing where you need to press. And then again, I would practice. Now, the next chord we're going to look at is an E minor 7, which is taking the pinky off. So now we only have 1 note that's being played by the fingers other than the bar, right? This case happens to be an E. Right, so now I almost have to bar everything. And in my case, apparently I do. You don't have to put any pressure right here, but this is as close as you're likely to get to a bar of all 6 strings, right? So once you've gotten really good at this, then you get good at this, life should be getting easier for the bar itself. Take that off and then move that around. And then eventually, even though this is a rarely played chord, you work your way up to playing all 6 strings with a bar. So while we're here, we've been looking at chords whose root is on the 6th string, and therefore you need the bar to cover all 6 strings. But a lot of bar chords, a lot of really common ones, are based on the A shapes, right, which is only 5 strings. So when I do a bar like this, I actually move my index from here, as you'll see, to here, right? It just gives me that same amount of control that I had here when I'm here, and I like being able to have the tip of my finger play what happens to be the root of these chords here, and it lets me sort of mute the 6th string, so that's an added bonus, because I might want to do that and not want this E to sound on the bottom. But that's kind of neither here nor there. That may or may not work for you. But what I would do is take the same idea that we did with these 6-string bar chords, and I would start with an A major. And in this case, remember, we only have to bar these 2. I don't have to bar any of those because some of you might play this chord like this. This turns out to be another kind of bar, where at the bottom we're letting this note ring. But either way, this bar is only playing these 2 strings. So that's a major, right? A minor, same bar, right? We've changed the shape of these chords, but the bar itself is still just 5th and 1st strings. Now, if I play a D minor 7, I'm taking the pinky off. Now these 3 have to sound, right? So that's a little bit of a different deal. And because this note is between these 2 fingers, you don't get to take quite as much pressure off, and it's closer to a full bar, right? So again, I would practice the same way we practice first major, minor, minor 7. I would practice major, minor just to get used to it, minor 7, right? And then the other common one here is the dominant, which is the same bar, right? The dominant and the minor 7 have the same bar because you're only playing the 4th and the 2nd strings. And then the major and the minor triads, same bar because you're only barring the 5th and the 1st, right? So I would practice these. Just to sort of get used to playing bar chords with the roots on the 6th string that are 6-note voicings, and bar chords with roots on the 5th that are 5-note voicings. And then another thing that happens a lot, especially in flamenco, is we use these, what we call half bars. Basically anything less than, let's say 5 strings, we'll call it a half bar. So something like this, right? You might do something like that. There's a lot of chords that don't have the 5th or the 6th string, and a lot of them have bars involved. So again, you're getting used to how to mush the finger when it's all 6 strings, how to mush the finger when it's all 5 strings, how to do that when it's 4 strings, and there will be times when you do 3 strings and even 2, right? And you just want to approach them all the same way, which is that pressing harder is not going to make life easier. What's going to really make your life easier is learning how to find your position, your finger, and how it relates to the frets. So if you're going to play flamenco, there's 2 chord progressions that I would practice in particular. The first one is A minor, G, F, and you might as well end with the E, even though it's not a bar chord, right? So these are triads. A minor, G major, F major, E major. And then, because we also use these chords, you might want to do the minor 7, the G7, the F7, and the E. And then in por medio, right, the key of A Phrygian, you would start with D minor triad, C triad, B flat triad, A triad, G minor 7, C7, B flat 7, and then A. I'm gonna play the A with the flat 9. This is a common chord. We can use A major or add the B flat to that chord. So if you want to get started just abstractly practicing bar chords, but also practicing really practical stuff for flamenco, or the sevenths, and then here you could do or seventh chords. And just remember to be patient with yourself. And if you resist from the beginning the temptation to press harder when it doesn't sound the way you want it to sound, you will much more quickly find what your finger needs to do to make your bars easier.